Like a silver streak across the midnight sky, our stories move with a brilliance and speed you will never forget. Experience high-octane drama and the thrill of a narrative that never slows down for anything. Click subscribe now and catch the streak before it disappears into the dark.
My mother drove 6 hours through a snowstorm to bring my cousin a casserole when her dishwasher broke. 6 hours. In December. On roads the news told everyone to stay off of. Let me say that again, because it took me years to understand what it meant. My mother risked her life over a broken dishwasher for a niece. But when I was 28 and got the call that my appendix had ruptured, and I was being rushed into emergency surgery alone in a city 40 minutes from her house, she texted me that she'd come by once I was settled in, because she didn't want to drive at night. I woke up from anesthesia to an empty room. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my apartment holding a manila envelope with my name written across it in my dead grandfather's handwriting. She wasn't there to apologize for the surgery. She was there to ask me to sign something, and she had no idea what was already sitting in my desk drawer, 12 feet away from where she sat. But this didn't start with the surgery. It started the spring. I turned 4, the day my cousin Delphine came to live with us. My name is Marlowe Beckett. I'm 31 now. Delphine was my aunt's daughter, and when my aunt died, my parents took her in. I understood that, even as a little kid. I understood that Delphine had lost her mom and needed extra love and extra patience and extra everything. What I didn't understand was why extra for Delphine always meant less for me. Not the same. Less. The first thing I remember clearly is the bedroom. We had a 3-bedroom house in Wheaton, Illinois, and when Delphine moved in, I was told we'd share. That was fine. I liked having someone, but within a year, my parents finished the basement into a bedroom, and I assumed it was for the new arrangement. It was. I got the basement. The windowless room with the water heater that clicked all night, and the spider problem my dad kept promising to handle. Delphine got my old room upstairs, the one with the bay window and the morning light. I was 6. When I asked my mom why, she crouched down and used the voice she always used. The soft, reasonable one that made you feel crazy for asking. Delphine's been through so much, sweetheart. She needs to feel safe. You're so easygoing. You can sleep anywhere. I learned that word early. Easygoing. It became the thing they called me whenever they needed me to want less. I was easygoing when my piano lessons got canceled so Delphine could take dance. I was easygoing when the family vacation to Disney World happened the one year I was at summer camp, and they didn't reschedule. And I came home to 1,000 photos of Delphine in mouse ears. I was easygoing when I wore Delphine's outgrown coats, but Delphine's coats were always bought new. I want to be fair, because I've spent a lot of money on therapy learning to be fair to the kid I was. Delphine didn't ask for any of this. We weren't enemies. As children, we actually loved each other, in the uncomplicated way kids do. The favoritism wasn't her crime. It was theirs. But I'd be lying if I said I never resented her, because resentment doesn't check whether it's logical before it moves in. School made the math impossible to ignore. We were 11 months apart, so we went through everything roughly together. When we hit high school, Delphine started showing talent for music. Real talent. I'll give her that. My parents found her a private vocal coach, $90 an hour, twice a week. They drove her to competitions in 3 states. When she made it into a prestigious summer conservatory program, they paid the $4,000 tuition without blinking. I remember sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while my dad wrote the check, and I remember thinking, very calmly, the way you think things when you've thought them 100 times, that I had asked for a $200 graphing calculator that semester and been told money was tight. I was good at one thing, and it was the thing that paid for itself. School. I was the kid who got straight A's because A's were free and they were mine, and nobody could give them to Delphine instead. I worked at a movie theater all through high school, scooping popcorn and saving every check, By senior year, I had $9,000 in a savings account I'd opened myself, lying about my age to the bank because you needed a parent and I didn't trust mine not to borrow it. College is where the resentment turned into a ledger I kept in my head whether I wanted to or not. I got into the University of Illinois with a partial scholarship. The rest I covered with my savings and federal loans. $38,000 borrowed over 4 years, every dollar of it mine to pay back. Delphine got into a smaller private school for music, $62,000 a year. My parents took out a parent loan and a home equity line of credit. They paid for her dorm, her meal plan, her sheet music, her recital gowns. When her car broke down sophomore year, my dad drove down with a check for a used Honda. When my car broke down sophomore year, my mom told me to look into the bus schedule. I graduated in 3.5 years to save a semester of tuition with $38,000 in debt and a degree in accounting. Delphine took 6 years to finish with 0 debt and a voice that, by everyone's quiet admission, was never quite good enough to pay the bills it had run up. I never said that out loud. I want that on the record. I never once threw it in anyone's face that the talent they'd bankrupted themselves for didn't pan out. I just paid my loans and kept my mouth shut and got very, very good at being easygoing. Here's the part that I still can't fully explain. The part the people in my life have asked me about over and over. I sent my parents money. Once I started my career at a mid-size firm in Chicago. Once I was making decent money. I started sending them $300 a month. It started after my dad mentioned in that casual, weaponized way that money was tighter than ever since the home equity line for Delphine's school. He didn't ask. He never asked. He just said it and let it hang there, and I filled the silence with $300 because that was the only language I'd ever been fluent in. Buying a little love. A little approval. A little of being seen. I did this for 7 years. $300 a month, every month. Even the months my own student loan payment of $510 left me eating rice and frozen vegetables for the last week before payday. $25,200 over 7 years. They never said thank you. Once, exactly, once, my mother said, "Your father appreciates it," which is not the same thing, and we both knew it. Delphine, as far as I ever knew, sent them nothing. Because Delphine had nothing. Because the money had always flowed one direction in our family, and I was apparently the headwaters. I met him at a tax seminar, of all the unromantic places. His name was Pruitt, and he taught high school economics, and he was the first person I ever dated who, when I described my family, didn't say "that sounds hard" and change the subject. He got quiet. Then he said, "You know that's not normal, right? The basement, the calculator, the $300, and I started crying in a Panera Bread because nobody had ever named it that plainly. Just said it out loud like a fact instead of a feeling I was making too big a deal of. Pruitt met my family at Easter. He watched my mother light up like a stadium when Delphine walked in and barely glance at me. He watched my dad ask Delphine 40 questions about a part-time gig she gotten singing at weddings, then turn to me and ask if I'd lost weight. Which in my family was the highest compliment available and also, somehow, an accusation. On the drive home, Pruitt held the steering wheel and said, "I need you to understand that I see all of it. And I'm never going to pretend I don't." I married that man 18 months later. We didn't have a big wedding. 40 people at a vineyard outside the city, paid for entirely by us, because asking my parents for $1 would have come with a lien. My parents came. They sat in the front row. I'll give them that. But my mother spent most of the reception talking to other guests about Delphine's blossoming music career, and when the photographer gathered everyone for family photos, my mom kept pulling Delphine into the frame, my cousin, into the immediate family shots, until the photographer gently asked who was who, and my mother said, "Oh, they're practically sisters." And I smiled so hard my face hurt. The appendix thing happened 2 years into our marriage. I'll keep it short because the details still make Pruitt's jaw tighten when they come up. I doubled over at work, drove myself to urgent care, got transferred to the ER, and was told my appendix had ruptured and I needed surgery immediately. Pruitt was at a conference 4 hours away. I called my mother from the gurney, scared in the bone-deep way you only get scared a few times in a life, and asked if she could come. She asked which hospital. I told her. There was a pause. And then she said the roads were getting dark, and she didn't love driving at night anymore, and she'd come by once I was settled in and comfortable. No point sitting in a waiting room. The casserole drive was 6 hours through a snowstorm. The hospital was 40 minutes in clear weather on a Tuesday. I did that math from the gurney. I've never stopped doing it. She visited the next afternoon for 35 minutes. She brought a magazine and spent 20 of those minutes telling me Delphine had a cold and felt just awful, and wasn't it a shame. I stopped sending the $300 that month. I didn't announce it. I just didn't send it, and for the first time in 7 years, the absence of that money in my account felt less like loss and more like the first clean breath after holding it too long. My grandfather died that fall. My dad's father, Calloway Beckett, a man I'd loved with an intensity that confused me as a kid, because he was the one adult who seemed to actually see me. He'd slip me $20 bills and tell me I was the smart one and mean it as a compliment, not a comparison. He'd been declining for a couple years, and when he passed, the funeral was the first time I'd seen my whole extended family in a long time. My grandfather had left things to be sorted, and an estate attorney named in his will, a woman named Imani Adebayo, was handling it. About 6 weeks after the funeral, my mother called and asked if she and my dad could come by, not to visit, to go over some family paperwork. I should have known. The tone was wrong, too bright, too rehearsed. But I'd spent my whole life answering when they called, so I said sure. They came on a Sunday. My mother sat on my couch holding a manila envelope, and I noticed it had my full name written across the front in handwriting I'd know anywhere. My grandfather's. Big looping letters, the way he wrote my name on birthday cards. My stomach did something complicated. My father did the talking, which was how I knew it mattered. Your grandfather left some things to be divided, he said. There's the matter of his savings, which is being split between the grandchildren. But the attorney, this Adebayo woman, she's asking about an account from a while back. A custodial account? What custodial account? I said. And here's where my mother, who had not stopped clutching that envelope, finally set it down on my coffee table and slid it toward me like it was hot. It's nothing, really. It's just paperwork. The attorney needs your signature to close everything out. There was an old education fund your grandfather set up years ago, and we need you to sign that you received it so the estate can finalize. I picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside were a few pages, and on top was a letter from Adebayo and Associates, dated 3 weeks earlier. Addressed to my parents, requesting a full accounting of a UTMA custodial account. Illinois, established in 2000, naming the beneficiary as Marlowe Jean Beckett. My grandfather had opened a college fund for me, in my name, and I had never heard a single word about it in my entire life. I kept my face very still, an accounting skill, and I read the next page. It was a release form, pre-written. By signing, I, Marlowe Beckett, would be acknowledging that I had received the full distribution of the custodial education account established for my benefit, and releasing the estate from any further obligation. There was no number on the form. They'd left it blank. They wanted me to release a number I'd never been allowed to see. How much was in it? I said. My mother said, "Oh, it doesn't matter now. It was a long time ago." How much? My father exhaled through his nose, the sound he made when I was being difficult. $80,000. Originally. Your grandfather put in 80,000 when you were 10. The room got very quiet. I had borrowed $38,000 to go to college. I had eaten frozen vegetables to make loan payments. I had lied to a bank at 16 to protect $9,000 of popcorn money, and there had been $80,000 with my name on it the entire time. Where did it go? I said. Nobody answered. So, I asked the question a different way. The way I ask things at work when the books don't balance and someone in the room is sweating. Show me the withdrawals. Marlowe. This is exactly why we wanted to handle this quietly. Show me. Show me. My father reached into the envelope and pulled out a set of statements he'd clearly hoped I wouldn't ask for. I will never forget reading them. The withdrawals started the year Delphine entered high school. A vocal coach paid quarterly, a summer conservatory $4,000, the exact figure that had lived in my memory for 15 years. Tuition transfers to a small private music college year after year, a used Honda, recital expenses. Every single line item was a thing I remembered, a thing I had watched them buy for my cousin while telling me money was tight. And every single one of them had been paid for out of a fund my grandfather had created for me. That money, my father said, and I have to give him this, at least he didn't pretend it was complicated, was family money. You were always going to be okay. You're the responsible one. Delphine needed it more. She'd lost her mother. We made a choice. It had my name on it. It was in our control as custodians. We were stewards of it for the whole family. It was a fiduciary account, I said, and I watched the word land. Watched him realize his daughter, the accountant, knew exactly what that word meant. You had a legal duty to use it for me. Only me. And you spent it on Delphine and let me take out loans. My mother started crying then. The way she always cried. The kind that's meant to end conversations. I can't believe you're making this about money. After everything we did for you, we gave you a home. We fed you. Family is supposed to take care of each other. I sent you $300 a month for 7 years, I said. Out of a salary I earned with the loans I took out because the money meant for my education was paying for Delphine's. Don't talk to me about family taking care of each other. She told me I was selfish. She told me my grandfather would be ashamed. She told me Delphine's feelings would be hurt if this got dredged up, and that the estate couldn't close until I signed, and that Delphine was counting on her share of Grandpa's savings, and did I really want to be the one who held it all up? I told them I'd think about it. I told them I needed to read everything first. And my father, in his hurry to leave a conversation that had stopped going his way, picked up the statements but left the envelope. The whole envelope, the release form, the attorney's letter, and at the very bottom, a single sealed thing I hadn't reached yet. A smaller envelope, cream-colored, soft with age, with my name on it in that same looping hand. He left it sitting on my coffee table. He left me the evidence and the confession all at once. I waited until their car pulled out of the driveway. Then I opened it. It was a letter, dated the same year the account was created. My grandfather had written it when I was 10 years old, to be read when I started college, and somewhere along the way it had been intercepted, because I was 31 and reading it for the first time on my living room floor. He wrote that he saw me. That was the first line, and it broke me open before I'd read anything else. He wrote that he had watched the way the house tilted toward Delphine, and that he understood why, and that he didn't entirely blame my parents because grief makes people strange, but that he would not stand by and let me be erased by it. He wrote that he was putting away $80,000 so that I would never have to make myself small to be taken care of, so that I could study whatever I wanted, become whoever I wanted, without the family deciding I needed less. He wrote, and I have it memorized now, that being the strong one is not the same as not needing anything, and that I should never let anyone use my strength as a reason to give me less. He wrote that the money was mine, only mine, and that if I was reading this and the money was gone, then someone had done me a wrong, and I should not be afraid to make it right, because making it right was not greed, it was self-respect. He told me he loved me. He told me I was the smart one, and that he'd always meant it as the truth, and never as a wound. And at the end, he wrote that he was leaving me his pocket watch, the one I used to wind on his lap, and that whenever I held it, I should remember that someone in this family had seen me clearly and chosen me on purpose. I sat on my floor and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child in a basement bedroom, listening to a water heater click. Then I called Pruitt and I read him the letter. And there was a long silence, and he said in a very controlled voice, "Don't sign anything. We're getting a lawyer tomorrow." The lawyer's name was Imani Adebayo, the same estate attorney handling my grandfather's will. And when I explained that I was the beneficiary of the account she'd been asking my parents about, there was a pause on the phone. And then she said, "I had a feeling. They've been very slow to provide that accounting." She took my case. She walked me through it in language I already half knew from my own work. Custodians of a UTMA account have a legal, fiduciary duty to use the funds for the named minor's benefit and no one else's. Spending it on another child, even a grieving cousin they'd taken in, even with the best of intentions, was a breach. A clear one. With documentation this clean, she said, it wouldn't even be close. We sent a demand letter. $80,000 in principal, plus the years of interest the account would have earned, plus the interest I'd paid on student loans I never should have needed. The number came to just under $140,000. 14 days to respond. My mother called 11 times the day they got it. I let it ring. Then I unblocked her once because I wanted to hear it, and she screamed that I was tearing the family apart, that they would have to sell the house, that I was no better than a stranger suing my own parents. I told her that my grandfather had used the word self-respect, not greed, and that I was inclined to trust him over her. Then I blocked her again, and this time it didn't feel like loss at all. Delphine called too, and that one I almost didn't survive. Because Delphine, it turned out, had genuinely never known. She'd thought her music education had been a sacrifice my parents made, scrimping and saving. She had no idea it had been my grandfather's money, my fund, my future, handed to her by adults who'd let us both believe a lie. She cried and said she would have never accepted a cent if she'd known. And I believed her. And I told her the kindest and hardest thing I've ever said to anyone. I told her that I didn't blame her, that I never had, but that I also couldn't keep being the one who paid so that no one in our family ever had to feel uncomfortable. I told her she could be angry at the people who'd actually done this, the way I finally was. We don't talk much now, but the last thing she said to me was that she hoped I got every dollar, and I think she meant it. They settled. Of course they settled. Adebayo told me their own attorney took one look at the statements in the letter and advised them they'd lose badly in court, with the added horror of public record. They agreed to $132,000, paid in 2 installments, and to do it they sold the house in Wheaton, the one with the bay window, and moved into a 2-bedroom rental. I felt the thing I'd been told my whole life I'd feel if I ever stood up for myself. I felt like a monster. For about a day. And then I felt, for the first time in 31 years, like a person who was allowed to exist at full size. The first check cleared on a gray morning in February. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and Pruitt's hand on my shoulder, and I logged into my student loan account, and I looked at the balance I'd been chipping at for 9 years. 31,000 and change. And I clicked Pay in Full, and I read the confirmation 3 times before I believed it. Then I paid off Pruitt's loans too, the ones he'd taught economics for a decade trying to clear. We didn't celebrate loudly. We just sat there. He kept squeezing my shoulder. I kept staring at a number that said 0. Well, was left. After the loans, we made a down payment on a small house with a porch, and good light in every room, no basement bedroom. And I wind my grandfather's pocket watch every Sunday and set it on the mantel. And I took $20,000 and I opened a fund, a real one, with an attorney and a clear purpose in my grandfather's name. It pays a small scholarship every year to a kid who's the responsible one, the easygoing one, the one in their family who's always told they'll be fine so the resources can go to someone else. The first recipient was a 19-year-old who'd been working 2 jobs and sleeping on a relative's couch and apologizing for taking up space. I met her to hand her the letter, and she kept saying she didn't deserve it. And I told her the same thing my grandfather had needed me to know. $80,000 and 21 years too late. You're not less worthy because you're the one who can survive without help. You deserve to be helped anyway. I haven't spoken to my parents in over a year. People ask if I regret it, if I miss them. And the honest answer is that I miss something. But it isn't them. I miss the parents I should have had. The ones who would have driven 40 minutes through a clear night to sit beside me when I was scared. The ones who would have handed me my own grandfather's gift instead of spending it behind my back and asking me to sign away the truth. That family never existed. I spent 31 years auditioning for a role in it anyway. They wanted me easygoing. They wanted me to want less, to need less, to take up the smallest possible amount of room and call it strength. So here is the thing I finally understand. The thing my grandfather knew when I was 10 and he wrote it down and somebody hid it from me. Being easy to overlook is not a virtue. It's just a wound that learned to stop complaining. I'm done being easygoing. I'm done being the headwaters. The money was only ever the smallest part of what they took, and the only part I could get back with a signature. The rest I had to take back myself, one clean breath at a time. The thing nobody tells you about being the easy child is that easy is just another word for ignored. I spent 31 years believing my parents loved me in a quieter way. A way I had to earn by needing nothing. It took my grandfather's letter, written when I was 10 and hidden from me until I was grown, to show me the truth I'd been trained not to see. Calloway knew what they were doing before they'd even finished doing it. And he tried to protect me. And they spent his protection on Delphine anyway. Cause and effect. Every withdrawal from that account had a matching consequence in my life. A loan. A sleepless night. A frozen vegetable week. And I'd been told the whole time that I was simply the strong one who didn't need help. One thing I've come to understand is that strength was never my problem. I had the grit. I worked the popcorn job, graduated early, paid every loan on time, sent money I couldn't spare. What I lacked for too long was the clear-eyed honesty to call a wrong instead of softening it into they did their best. When I finally let myself see the accounting plainly, the way I'd see it for any client, the math wasn't cruel. It was just true. And the moment I stopped lying to myself was the moment everything changed. If I could hand my younger self one thing, it wouldn't be the $80,000. It would be the permission to believe that being decent doesn't mean being silent. I always thought goodness meant absorbing the blow so no one else had to feel it. But there's nothing good about letting people steal from you and call it family. Real integrity, I've learned, requires a spine. It means telling the truth even when the truth gets your parents' house sold. It means refusing to sign your name to a lie just because crying people are asking you to. So I'd tell anyone listening to build all 3 of the things I had to learn the hard way. Build the character to stay honest when dishonesty would be easier and kinder seeming. Build the sharpness to actually look at your own life, to do the math, to see the patterns instead of explaining them away. And build the backbone to act on what you see. Because knowing you've been wronged and never doing anything about it is just a slower way of agreeing to it. I wind Callaway's pocket watch every Sunday now. It reminds me that one person saw me clearly and chose me on purpose, and that I get to be that person for someone else now. Delphine and I are not close, but we're not enemies. And I think we both finally know who actually did the taking. The money came back. The years didn't. But the woman who used to make herself small to be tolerated, she's gone, and I don't miss her at all.